fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
The war on our identity. Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again here for the Salt Strong Unchurched. And if you heard the podcast I did with Chris McAllister, I've received so many comments on that one, by the way, and private messages. So thank you. Chris has probably done more research and has talked to more people and has studied this whole identity issue more than anyone. He's written a book about it. And during that podcast, we talked about what's happening and I'm just seeing it more and more. I don't know if you guys saw, and this is kind of what spurred this, but there was a trans, as in transgender, Lives Matter. So now there's Trans Lives Matter protesters. They occupied the Oklahoma Capitol building to fight some bills that ban gender-conforming surgery for people under age 21. And these people, the Trans Lives Matter, are saying, hey, you should be able to change gender any age, and the government should even pay for it, which they're doing in places like California. And I'm shaking my head, and this is not out of disrespect for anyone dealing with that or anyone who has kids that deal with that. I always put myself, anytime I see stuff like this, what if it was my child? First, I wouldn't want them to do something. I mean, just think about how immature we are when we're a teenager. We think we know everything. Many times we are confused, and I think it would be just an absolute shame to let someone do that to their bodies, which is really tough to go backwards on. And who knows how screwed up you are in the head by the time that happens. Anyhow, all that. But I do think that we are called to love everyone. I want to preface what I'm about to say with that we are called to love everyone, to do as Jesus would do, is to accept everyone. At the same point, to point them in the right direction, to point them to God, to point them to Jesus. Hey, maybe let's try something else before we literally try to change our gender. And here's why I believe this is so important. And what Chris shared, in the Bible, the very first time that Satan tries to tempt Jesus to basically get in his head, it was when Jesus had basically, he'd been fasting, is out in the wilderness, right? It's the wilderness moment. And Satan, out of all the things Satan can do, right? He could try to, put women in front of him, right? For lust. He could try to do all this stuff to make Jesus look bad. And what does he do? He attacks his identity. He literally starts making him doubt that he's not the Son of God. Think about that. Satan can do anything he wants to in this moment. He's got Jesus here. He literally can put anything out in front of him. It could have been drugs. It could have been transgender, right? Let's change your gender. It could have been any of this stuff. And he goes after the identity. That's wild. And here we are, right? In this day and age, and one of the big things that we're constantly hearing is this identity confusion, let's just call it, of all these people all of a sudden come out of the woodworks just confused on their identity. It's still the minority, but their voice is so loud, and Satan is sitting there just laughing. He's like, all right, I found something that's triggering a lot of people, and it's confusing a lot of people. And even worse, remember what I said, this whole bill and all these people are literally protesting, and there's Trans Lives Matter. They're going after our kids, guys. They're going after our kids. This whole thing is, because if you're 40, you can do whatever the heck you want to. They're literally going after our kids. This whole issue here, and why these protesters are there at the Capitol building there in Oklahoma, they're going after people under age 21. It's sickening. It's crazy. And so when I went through all this stuff with Chris, I'll be honest, I didn't get it at first, meaning I didn't get the importance of identity. I'm like, oh, I'm Joe Simons, CEO of Salt Strong, and blah, blah, blah. I'm, married, and I'm a husband and got the kids. And And I didn't get it. And the more we dug into this, it was almost kind of like those wilderness moments where you have these ahas and like, whoa, man, I am loved for me, not because I'm Joe Simons and not because I'm the CEO of Salt Strong and not because I'm a dad or a husband or any of this stuff. It's because I'm a son of God and I am loved and I am worthy, regardless, if you listen to my last podcast of how someone looks at me or if I fumble and look like an idiot. Does God love me any less because of that? No, absolutely not. But it all starts with having a strong identity and knowing who you are. I think so much of the pain and the anxiety and the fears and just the confusion and depression that's happening today is this just zero clarity on who you are, who, the people who are suffering, who they have literally no idea who they are, which is why they're just trying to grasp onto anything. Because right, all of a sudden, if you wake up and you have no relationship with God, you have no relationship with Jesus, maybe your parents are barely even there for you. Maybe you're even having hardly any relationships in school or whatever it is. And you're like, well, hey, man, life's kind of depressing. I probably just need to change my identity. Right. So if I'm a guy, maybe I'll just try to be a girl. Maybe that'll make me happy. That's what's happening here. Right. I mean, and there's been so many people who have gone through this at a young age. And now fast forward, they're like, that was the worst decision I ever made. I'm still confused. I'm even more confused now on why I'm not happier. Right. It's almost like buying a new car. I'm sure it might make them happier just subconsciously, like, oh, cool. I'm a new person. I got a new look on life. But that's not the answer. We got to dig deeper and focus on who we are as a person and not trying to change our sex because of it. But I'm telling you, Satan is just smiling down. And at some point, we're going to have to put our feet down. And once again, if you're 40, 50, 60 years old, do whatever the heck you want. Right? You have the right to do what you want to your body, but don't try to push this on the kids and make this seem like this is a cool or a thing that you should be doing. It is absolutely not. And the majority of people there, and even this happened to my own kids, I would have to say the same thing, are not right in the heads. And I truly believe of just Satan is just absolutely just smiling and lapping it up when he sees stuff like this happen. And I believe we're going to continue to see this war on identity. And I do believe as Christians, as people are putting God and Jesus first, we are called to love them. Just like if any of my kids came out and said they were anything, if they were gay or confused, I am still absolutely going to love them and be for them 100%. I'm going to try to talk some love into them. I'm going to try to get them focused on their identity and make them realize that, hey, you are absolutely loved who you are. You don't have to sit there and change everything about you. I mean, everything is at all-time highs, from plastic surgery and all this stuff about changing ourselves, because we're so just lack the confidence, and we lack all of the things that are already there deep inside us that God already gave us. But I don't know. I think it all just goes back to not ever taking the time to sit there and answer that question. Who am I? Who am I? Because that was the first question that Chris asked me. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer it. It took me a couple weeks before it kind of like clicked. And I obsessed over it. Like every day I'd sit down at the dock. I'm like, who am I? And I just kind of kept tearing all these different layers off of what I thought I was, right? And how I look at myself in the mirror. And I was like, all right, if I'm not the CEO of Salt Strong, does God love me any more or less? Nope, doesn't change things. So you right, if all of a sudden I'm not married anymore, does God love me any more or less? If I'm not a dad, does God love me any more or less? Right? We kind of put ourselves into these roles based on the role that we play here in this world, and sometimes get too wrapped up in it when we don't realize, hey man, even if this it doesn't work out, or even if things change, I'm still loved. I'm still worthy. And I believe a lot of the trans lives matter people, they don't feel loved, they don't feel worthy, and so they're just going to the next obvious thing is, hey, I just need to change my whole identity, and maybe that'll fix things. But until you get down to the core, it's not going to help. At least that's been my experience. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'd love feedback on this. I'm not saying I'm right. These are the thoughts that I've had after studying this and being around Chris and just going back to the Bible, right? I mean, it's kind of tough to argue with that. The very first time that Satan has a chance to basically destroy and try to ruin the future of Jesus, he goes after the identity. And now here we are in our world, and there is this massive identity crisis, and I believe will turn into this identity war because they are very loud. And I think the majority of the population is kind of shaking their head like, why are they even doing this? But now when you start trying to say, hey, we need to have this approved for kids under 21 and the government needs to help pay for it, which is happening in some states, like, to me, that's pretty scary. And this goes way beyond transgender kids in sports, which is a whole nother topic and pretty obnoxious, by the way. The fact they're even remotely accepting of this, give them, if it's that important that they get to play sports, give them their own, like have men's, women's, and trans, right? Let them compete against themselves is how I think about it. And, whether you agree with me or not, I think that's only fair. I'd be ticked off if my daughter had trained her whole life to be the best in the world at something and lost to a guy who was confused on their identity. Let them have their own lane, give them their own awards and their own banquets, and let them do their own thing. I'm way, obviously, I think you know where I stand on this against all of that. I don't think they should be any less loved. Certainly not. Even if it was my own child, I certainly would love them the same way I do today, and I would encourage them and be rooting for them. But I mean, what's fair is fair. Anyhow, I just got completely off my soapbox on that one. But guys, I love all you. I highly appreciate all the feedback on this, and the more I keep seeing this stuff pop up, and the more conversations I've seen from even parents who I'm close with who have kids who are competing and going against this, I just think this is something we're going to be battling. But the more I see this, and I saw my wife had shown me the picture of the protesters there, and it wasn't just like 10 of them. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of them, as far as you could see. Might have been thousands of them, and that was just in Oklahoma. They've got a movement going. If I'm going to call it that, they do have a movement going, and I believe it's just fueled by Satan. I mean, he's literally sitting there trying to confuse us as much as we can, to turn away from God, to turn away from Jesus, to, hey, let's not focus on the core. Let's not focus on who we are. Let's just try to change our identities, right? That'll fix everything. No, that causes more confusion. And even here, I mean, it's, causing more division because it's kind of tough to agree with that a 17 or 18-year-old should be able to have a sex change. And at that young of age, they're not mature enough to handle it or even understand it. And once again, I'm willing to bet none of them have gone through like the process that Chris put you through is, hey, let's just dig down deep and figure out who we are. What is the root cause of how and why you're feeling this way? That tends to solve a lot. So I love you guys. Love your feedback on this, Joe at saltstrong.com. And I will talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's